A 600-year-old book has defeated every expert on Earth. The Voynich Manuscript sits behind glass at Yale University right now. 240 pages of text. Over 170,000 handwritten characters. Not a single word has ever been translated. Not by the NSA. Not by IBM supercomputers. Not by the codebreakers who cracked the Nazi Enigma machine during World War II. The manuscript appeared in 1912. A Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich found it in a Jesuit college in Italy. He immediately knew something was wrong. The pages showed plants that don't exist. Astronomical charts that make no scientific sense. Naked women bathing in green liquid connected by biological tubes. And every page covered in an alphabet nobody had ever seen. Voynich sent copies to the world's best linguists. They studied it for months. Every single one failed. The text looked like language. It had repeating patterns. Statistical regularities. But it meant absolutely nothing they could decipher. Carbon dating in 2009 proved the vellum pages were made between 1404 and 1438. The ink tested consistent with 15th century materials. This wasn't a modern hoax. Someone in medieval Europe created an entire encyclopedia in a language that has never existed anywhere else on the planet. But here's what nobody expected to find. Wilfrid Voynich wasn't looking for the manuscript that would consume the rest of his life. He was a 48-year-old rare book dealer working in London. In 1912, the Society of Jesus offered to sell some manuscripts from Villa Mondragone near Rome. The Jesuits needed money. Voynich needed inventory. He found the manuscript in a chest. When he opened it, he saw something that made his hands shake. The book measured 9 by 6 inches. Bound in worn goatskin vellum. The pages felt genuine medieval parchment made from calfskin. But the contents looked like they'd been written by someone from another world. Section 1 showed 113 botanical illustrations. Detailed drawings of plants with roots, leaves, flowers. Except none of them matched any known species. One plant had roots that spiraled like DNA helixes. Another had flowers growing in impossible geometric patterns. Section 2 contained astronomical diagrams. Circular charts filled with stars and moons. But the configurations didn't match any historical understanding of the cosmos. Some pages showed zodiac-like symbols. Others depicted what looked like cells under a microscope, except microscopes powerful enough to see cells didn't exist in 1404. Section 3 showed the naked women. Dozens of small female figures bathing in green and blue liquids. Connected by tubes. Emerging from bulbous structures. It looked biological. Medical. Alchemical. Nobody could tell. The final section appeared to be recipes or pharmaceutical instructions. Lists of ingredients. Step-by-step procedures. All written in the incomprehensible script. Voynich photographed every page. He sent copies to William Romaine Newbold at the University of Pennsylvania. Newbold was America's leading medievalist and cryptographer. Newbold studied the manuscript for 7 years. In 1921, he announced he'd cracked it. He claimed the text was a double-layer cipher. That it described microscopic observations of cellular structures and nebulae. That it proved medieval scholars had telescopes and microscopes centuries before the official invention. The academic world celebrated. Then they looked closer. Newbold's decryption method was completely arbitrary. He was finding patterns that didn't exist. Seeing meaning in random noise. By 1931, other scholars had completely debunked his work. Newbold died in 1926, his reputation destroyed. The manuscript remained unreadable. But the obsession had just begun. In 1969, the manuscript arrived at the most powerful code-breaking agency on Earth. The NSA National Security Agency had cracked Soviet encryption. Intercepted communications from hostile nations worldwide. Their cryptanalysts were the best humanity had ever produced. They applied every technique in their arsenal to the Voynich manuscript. First, they ran frequency analysis. In every human language, certain letters appear more often than others. In English, E appears most frequently. In Spanish, A dominates. The Voynich text showed similar statistical patterns. The most common character appeared in 10% of all instances. The second most common in 8%. This matched natural language distribution almost perfectly. But when they tried substitution ciphers, nothing worked. When they tested transposition methods, they got gibberish. When they applied the Enigma breaking techniques that won World War II, they failed completely. The NSA ran computer analyses. In the 1970s, their mainframes were the most advanced on the planet. The computers found that Voynich words followed Zipf's law, a mathematical pattern that only appears in natural human languages. In real languages, the most common word appears twice as often as the second most common word. 3 times as often as the third most common word. This pattern holds across every known human language from English to Mandarin. The Voynich Manuscript followed this exact pattern. It had the statistical fingerprint of real language. But it wasn't any language that had ever existed. In 1978, Prescott Currier, an NSA cryptanalyst, published his findings. He discovered the manuscript was written by at least 2 different scribes. He called them Hand 1 and Hand 2. They used slightly different character frequencies. More disturbingly, he found that certain characters only appeared at the beginning of words. Others only at the end. This is called positional entropy. It's a feature of real languages, not random gibberish or simple ciphers. Currier concluded the Voynich manuscript was either an unknown natural language or the most sophisticated constructed language ever created. Then came the artificial intelligence era. In 2011, researchers at the University of Arizona fed the manuscript into machine learning algorithms. The AI had been trained on 400 known languages. It identified patterns, made predictions, suggested the underlying language might be Hebrew with all the vowels removed. Linguists tested this theory. They tried reconstructing Hebrew vowels into the text. It produced nonsense. In 2017, Canadian researchers used AI to suggest the base language was Arabic. Again, testing revealed nothing meaningful. In 2019, a team used neural networks to analyze the botanical illustrations. They identified possible matches to plants from Central America. This created an explosive new theory. What if the manuscript was created after European contact with the Americas? What if it documented New World plants in a constructed code? Carbon dating destroyed this theory immediately. The vellum was definitively created between 1404 and 1438. Christopher Columbus didn't reach the Americas until 1492. Unless someone was using 90-year-old blank pages to create a hoax decades later. But chemical analysis of the ink showed it was applied when the vellum was still relatively fresh. Every test opened a new door. Every door led to a wall. But the biggest shock was still coming. In 2016, a British scholar named Nicholas Gibbs claimed he'd finally solved it. Gibbs studied the manuscript for 30 years. He noticed tiny marks in the margins, faint Latin abbreviations. He claimed the entire manuscript was a medical reference guide for women's health, written in abbreviated Latin mixed with symbolic notation. The Times of London published his findings. The story went viral worldwide. Finally, after 600 years, the Voynich manuscript had been decoded. Then actual linguists examined Gibbs's work. He had no academic credentials in medieval studies. His Latin abbreviations were either misidentified printer marks or completely fabricated. His translation method had no consistent rules. He was cherry-picking tiny details and building enormous conclusions on nothing. The academic community demolished his claims within 72 hours. The manuscript remained unreadable. But something else emerged from the renewed attention. Something far more disturbing. In 2017, a researcher named Lisa Fagan Davis examined the original manuscript at Yale. She studied it under different light spectrums: ultraviolet, infrared, multispectral imaging that could see beneath the surface of the vellum. She found something nobody had noticed in 600 years. Someone had erased an earlier text. Faint chemical traces showed the vellum had been scraped clean before the Voynich text was written. This was common medieval practice. Parchment was expensive. Scribes often recycled old manuscripts. But the underlying text was completely gone. Scraped so thoroughly that even modern imaging could only detect trace evidence that something had been there. What was someone trying to hide? Then came the DNA analysis. In 2018, researchers extracted genetic material from the vellum pages. Ancient DNA trapped in the parchment fibers. They identified the animal species used to make each page. Most pages came from calfskin. Standard medieval practice. But 7 pages came from a completely different animal. The DNA matched no known species in the genetic database. The researchers assumed contamination. They ran the tests again. Same result. 7 pages of the Voynich manuscript were made from an animal that modern science cannot identify. This is where the theories get dark. Some researchers suggest the manuscript is a hoax created by Voynich himself in 1912. But the carbon dating proves the vellum is genuinely medieval. The ink is period correct. Creating a hoax this sophisticated would require technology that didn't exist in 1912. Others suggest it's an elaborate troll. A medieval scribe inventing nonsense to fool contemporaries. But why invest months of painstaking work on 240 pages? Why create such statistically convincing fake language? The effort required would be astronomical. The most compelling theory emerged in 2020. A team of researchers suggested the manuscript might be written in a constructed language created specifically for the book. Like Tolkien's Elvish or Star Trek's Klingon. But created in 1404. The problem? Constructed languages need a key. A dictionary. A grammar guide. Without the creator's notes, a constructed language is permanently unreadable. If this theory is correct, the Voynich manuscript will never be decoded. The key died with whoever created it 600 years ago. But that doesn't explain the unidentified animal DNA. Or the erased underlying text. Or why someone would create an elaborate constructed language encyclopedia and then never reference it anywhere else in recorded history. The Voynich manuscript has now been studied by hundreds of experts across 6 centuries. Every cutting-edge technology has been applied. Every code-breaking method has failed. It sits in Yale's Beinecke Rare Book Library. Item MS-408. Anyone can request to view it. But nobody can read it. The Voynich manuscript represents something unique in human history. We have cracked ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. We decoded the Rosetta Stone. We translated cuneiform from extinct civilizations. We broke the Nazi Enigma code that used rotors and complex mechanical encryption. But a single medieval book defeats us completely. 600 years of the world's smartest people have failed. The NSA failed. IBM failed. Modern AI systems trained on millions of documents failed. 3 possibilities remain. First, it's gibberish. An elaborate hoax with no meaning. Just sophisticated-looking nonsense designed to fool people. The statistical patterns are coincidental. The effort was a medieval practical joke. But this doesn't explain the time investment. Or the unidentified DNA. Or why someone would create 240 pages of statistically convincing fake language using expensive materials. Second, it's a constructed language without a key. Someone in 1404 invented an entirely new language and writing system. Then documented it in this single manuscript. Then died without leaving any other trace. This is possible. But it suggests a mind working centuries ahead of its time. Creating linguistic patterns that match natural language evolution. For no apparent purpose. Third, it's real. A genuine document in a language we've lost. From a civilization we don't know existed. Using knowledge we haven't rediscovered. The unidentified animal DNA supports this. The impossible plants might be species that went extinct. The astronomical charts might reflect knowledge we've forgotten. But from where? Every known medieval culture has left other traces. Buildings. Artifacts. More documents. The Voynich manuscript stands completely alone. The manuscript continues to attract obsessed researchers. People who dedicate their entire careers to cracking it. Most fail and move on. Some fail and never recover professionally. It sits in New Haven, Connecticut. Behind climate-controlled glass. A permanent mystery. The pages will last another 1,000 years. The vellum is stable. The ink is permanent. But unless someone discovers a key hidden in another medieval archive somewhere on Earth, the Voynich manuscript will remain exactly what it is now, the only book in human history that has successfully resisted every attempt at understanding. And if you found this case as haunting as the experts who've spent decades staring at those pages, you might want to stick around because in our archives, there's another encrypted object. One that appeared on a dead man's body in Australia. And unlike the Voynich manuscript, someone might have actually decoded it before mysteriously dying. Send this to someone who needs to hear it. Then subscribe for a new dark truth every day.